Hello everyone, and welcome back to Persona 3 Reload! I'm Eire from Saturn's Edge, and you're back for episode 7. This officially makes my 10th video on the channel. I have no idea when I'm gonna get 10 subscribers on the other hand, but hey, if I hit 10, maybe I'll do a little special something. I'll figure it out. In the last episode, we went through more of Tartarus, and we started out with social links, and we started learning what those are. And, for the first time ever, I didn't take a break when I was talking through the episode. It was all talk. Sure, I had to make, cuts for my audio and decide what to say next since I'm doing most of this unscripted. But there's no gaps of silence unless it was absolutely necessary, so I consider this a win. First thing we have here is Mitsuru is talking about a new combat mechanic we have access to. Because the game realizes that it is an RPG where, you grind a lot, you do a lot of battles, and you want to save some SP, there is the option to rush, which is basically just everyone automatically takes turns and does physical attacks. Me personally, I don't want to do that. I don't feel like doing that, even if I have to waste SP in the process, right? I don't feel like doing that because a lot of the fun for me, it comes from doing the battles and, playing them, and to basically have something that's like the rush mode, where I just don't have to focus on the game at all instead of feeling, entirely invested, it's not worth it to me. I'm pretty sure rush mode is only going to be, important to me if I'm going through, way earlier floors, but even then, I'd prefer to stick to floors that I could level up from. I feel like that'd just be the way to go. Is this to say that the rush mechanic is useless? No, it is not, but it is not something that I am going to be using on camera almost ever. Now, today's episode is going to be a long one, but luckily there is a lot I can cover in the meantime. Just, fun little facts about the game, about different mechanics, and I think overall it's just going to be a fun time to talk about these while we're just going through Tartarus for a minute. Now, you've noticed that I've done this a lot, but whenever I'm coming up on a shadow, I stop running, and instead I, choose to wait for a minute until I get, a good, vantage point. I like sneaking in on them to get that seize advantage. Mainly because it just makes the battles quicker, and also it just feels way better to do than to, do it normally, and it's just a better scenario than if I were attacked first. So I prefer to get that seize advantage all the time. During shuffle time, you notice that I struggle to choose cards occasionally. This is because, well, I just have trouble choosing. I like having money. I like getting XP for the personas that are currently in my party and for, my teammates. I like it, when I have a full stock and I'm able to get XP for the personas of, a specific type. I like getting a new persona, I like all these different things, right? I like recovery of health. There's a couple that I just don't choose as often. One of them being the skill card one, and one of them being the, hey, next battle your attack or defense is gonna be up. I prefer, proper recovery, instant gratification kind of thing. But with the skill card one, I don't choose that one often, and it's kind of a shame because the skill card one is kind of useful. I mean, a skill card works in a pretty unique way where you could just take that card and stick that move that is on the card to a persona of your choosing. I don't know if certain personas can just not learn certain moves from these cards. I don't know if it's a very open situation where anything goes, and I don't know if it's a very closed-off one where only certain ones can learn this card. All I do know is that the skill cards are actually pretty useful if you want to make a good, a good build for a persona, but that also relies on, stats and buffing stats and, a ton of other different things, It takes quite a while to do something like that, and the skill cards are just kind of a way to push that back a bit, I guess. Now, you've also noticed that a couple of my personas, I think only Orpheus right now though, cannot learn any more moves. There's no other, level up moves listed. I can play skill cards on him, but I choose not to because he's already, done and over with. Obviously, as you go on, the game gives you more personas and access to more of them that are stronger and better and have more stats and moves and Stuff like that, right?
Pretty well.
And I just don't like spending all that time on training like a base level one all the way up, and, you know, getting a higher level one is just better. The other thing to note is that whenever a persona is like stopping, like does not need to learn any more moves, like it literally can, I will actually try to shift them out of my party. I don't need them in my stock anymore, because they have no other real purpose just yet. I like trying to complete the Persona's full move list, and then registering them, because then it's just done and over with, it's complete. And if I ever wanted to do more with it, I could just pull it up at any time, add more stuff to it, register it again, and it's still good. I like having like a, I'm gonna put it in air quotes here, a complete Persona, where the Persona has learned everything it needs to and just doesn't need to do anymore. Another part of why I do this the way I do it, where I remove whatever's the complete Persona, I do this for variety, rather than just like, oh yeah, something better will come along. I do it specifically for variety. I don't like seeing the same things over and over again, especially when I'm playing a game like this that kind of relies you to do that exact thing. And I want to show you everything that this game has to offer, or at least as much as I can show you. Because it's just difficult to get to some parts. It's a mess. Point is if I'm going to show you everything this game has to offer, that includes switching out my personas for new ones, constantly. And I feel like that's just very nice and natural, and I feel like it's a good natural transition from completing a persona to starting a new one. If I don't end up replacing a persona that is complete, I'm doing it mainly for the sake of balance, because Pixie's the only one with CO, and if I remove them, then I don't have that move ever, unless I took a skill card and placed it on a different persona. Point is like, I prefer balance first, but variety is what should take place mainly as my main goal of all of this. And right there we have the poison effect from Yukari's bow leading directly into a critical from Junpei. That was really smooth. That was actually really good damage. Speaking of poison, let's take a moment and let's talk about status ailments. There are exactly 10 status ailments in this game, and in order, they are down, dizzy, freeze, shock, poison, charm, fear, rage, panic, and distress. And I'm going to talk about the differences here. So, down and dizzy are actually pretty similar. Down only happens whenever you hit the enemy's weakness, and that could be with an elemental type attack, a physical attack, basically anything. Dizzy, on the other hand, is specifically for critical attacks. Now, whenever you're able to hit both of these, your enemy loses their turn briefly, and you get a one more action. It's really interesting that they have one that is applied with critical attacks only, and most critical attacks are going to be physical. So it's really nice to have something that kind of balances that out. The other duo here, that would be freeze and shock. These are both pretty similar, however, here's what freeze does. It renders the enemy unable to move, and they lose a turn. But during this state, if the target is hit, they're more likely to be hit with a critical hit. However, shock is a bit different. It stuns the target, making them unable to move, but instead of losing a turn, they take electric damage at regular intervals. Hitting a shock target instead will guarantee a critical hit. So you're actually trading losing a turn for a better chance at a critical hit, guaranteeing it. Poison is an interesting case here. Poison targets take damage over time based on a fixed percentage. So the internal math in this says that there is a certain percentage of their max HP that needs to be dropped every time poison comes into play. And it's something that cannot be recovered unless you use a spell or an item. The other big catch about poison is that it only lasts until the target reaches 1 HP. It will not kill. Next one on the list is Charm. Basically it works like this. Allies become enemies, enemies become allies. So, what does this mean? Well, it will attack its own allies, but also potentially heal its own enemies. This is pretty interesting, and it can lead to some pretty tough situations. Next up is the Fear status, which makes them lose a turn. However, there is potential for this. They can just flee from the battle. During this status, the affected target can actually have a higher likelihood of being hit with a critical hit. And on top of that, certain spells actually can inflict fear. Whenever this happens to one of your party members, it's highly recommended that you just cure it as quickly as possible, because you do not want to lose an ally in battle immediately. And here we have the more complicated status effects. This first one is Rage. All it does is cause the targets to act recklessly. Doesn't seem too bad so far, so what's the big problem? Well, it forces them to automatically attack in battle and ignore commands. Most often, it will be a physical attack. However, there is a weird sort of mathematical bit to this. The enraged unit is going to have increased attack, and it will attack twice per turn. That seems great, so why is that a problem? Well, it's doing this with lowered accuracy and defense. So if they do hit, it's terrible. Like, it's gonna be good for you if... You get the point. It's basically just not good if it hits. And if it misses, it's also not good, because that lowered accuracy is just going to stick around until the status effect ends. And that lowered defense makes you an easier target, too. On the opposite side of the spectrum, in terms of complexity, we have Panic. All Panic does is make it so that you can't use personas or magic spells. You can't do any of it. Physical attacks or items only. So, you can cure this pretty much instantly. But, if you aren't able to cure it, you're basically just stuck doing physical attacks only. And the last one on the list, one that you're gonna find more often than not, is Distress. Distress lowers the target's defense and makes them more likely to take a critical hit. Light or dark type insta-kill spells will have increasing success rates against these units. This is actually pretty interesting, as it plays on a set of typings that we haven't come across yet. Now, you may be wondering this, right? We know that Freeze comes from Ice-type attacks, and we know that Shock comes from Electric-type attacks. So, what about Fire and Wind? Do they offer anything? No, they don't. But it's kind of interesting that they don't. In some games, fire does burn, but not in this one. And wind kind of doesn't have anything. The main reason behind this is actually pretty unique in terms of story. Actually, less of story and more of gameplay. If you think about it, something like Freeze or Shock, the status conditions affected by certain persona skills, are done by personas of that type. And so we have Yukari and we have Junpei, who have wind and fire skills respectively. The game eases you in to different status effects by showing you the two characters first that don't have status effects, while giving yourself access to ones, if you really work for them, ones that do have status effects. So it's pretty interesting that it eases you in, before eventually you get more party members that are able to do these specific sorts of things. I really like how this works. It's a bit, slow, I guess, because it takes a while to get a new party member, but also, like, it's just kind of neat that it eases you into it rather than dropping you instantly into it and praying that you know already. So, what else can I talk about? Well, I'll tell you, we're going to be talking about the stats next, and how it all works. Stats are divided up into 3 sections: your social, your combat, and your persona. Your combat is as simple as this: HP, SP, attack, defense, evasion. That is as simple as it gets. Every level, your HP and SP will go up. However, your attack, defense, and evasion are all directly tied to your equipment. They do not raise any, at all when you level up. You have to buy better equipment if you want that specific stat to be higher. Next is social stats, and social stats, there's only 3 of them. You have your courage, you have your academics, and you have your charm. You need these to be certain levels, as they will allow you to do certain things outside of combat, in what I would call like the normal hours. You could be able to attend a club if you have enough courage. You could start social links if you have enough academics. You could do a couple different things as long as you're high enough level for them. So that leaves one set of stats left. That would be the persona stats. Personas have 5 different stats. You have your strength, which represents the strength and physical damage. Your magic, which represents magic and magical damage. Endurance, which determines defense and how much damage you can take. Agility, which determines your place in the turn order. And luck, which is taken into account when certain skills come into play, involving status conditions and instant death abilities. Specifically for the strength and magic ones, you need to note that these are specifically tied to the persona. They are not tied to your character's physical attacks. Your character's physical attacks are tied to equipment. Your persona's physical attacks, or magical attacks, are tied directly to their persona internal stats. And perfect timing, we have now hit a couple special floors that have no enemies on them at all. This is really good timing, as now we get to move on to something a bit more different than what we've been doing. That's right, we're progressing in the story, but not only are we progressing in the story slightly, we're also going to be doing a bit of grinding, so we're going to sit here for a while and talk more about that before we get into the real meat and potatoes of today's episode, which I'm going to love to show you in just a minute. Not even a minute, it's going to take quite a while, but you'll see. Anyways, so what we have hit currently is called a border floor. Now, the border floor actually represents the end of a block of Tartarus. And so we've been going through the Tevil block, right? Our next block is just beyond the border, but we need something to get through it and make sure that we can get to the next one. I have no idea how big these blocks actually are, but this first one, Tevil, has been about 20 floors. And note, that's 20 floors of very early game mechanics, of learning, of tutorials, of understanding combat and abilities and personas and the way the whole system works. This is when you're at technically your weakest, when you don't have as many abilities as you want to have, when you're starting out on items, when you're just trying to work your way up and actually get stronger and better, and get through these fights even faster. That is the early game that we have just gone through, and there is so much more of this game to come. But for now, sadly, we're gonna have to grind up a couple levels, or at least one level. I'm not sure. Point is I want to get a bit more experience under my belt. And the best way to do that is to go to the higher floor of the block that we're currently in, and just work from there, because enemies give out more experience and items, and really it's just more challenging and it keeps your mind fresh, especially for battling. For me, my mind is just always running all the time, except for when I'm like really hard focused on one specific task. So, like, focusing on these battles and doing this grinding is actually really helpful for me to keep my brain just moving as quickly as possible. Because eventually, if it moves extremely fast, it's gonna, like, stop, but it's also gonna allow me to just laser focus in. So, I've got to fill this massive gap of time I have, about 13 minutes, so I'll just continue to talk about some random fun facts that I picked up off of doing some research and learning more about the game and the character specifically. Rather than getting into the nitty-gritty of things and talking about in-game stats and stuff, I'm going to talk more about facts about character design and really just different aspects of art and design while I have the time. For example, I found out what our protagonist's MP3 player is supposed to be. The model is a Sony NWS205F 2GB Walkman MP3 player in silver. This was only sold in Japan, and it's extremely hard to find online. The reason why? It's discontinued because it was made back in, like, 2006, and it's only 2GB, so it doesn't store much at all. I also managed to find out what the earphones model is supposed to be. Those are an ATH EM700SV. And as a fun little promotion for the 4 Persona 3 movies, they decided to release these earphones with a special Persona 3 the movie print right on the side of them. They are now retailing on like eBay and stuff for like $400 because there was a very limited quantity of these, and it was such a high quality like remake of an old model that it just had to be this expensive. Another fun fact about our protagonist character is that he was the first one that was actually designed for Persona 3. And it's pretty interesting because the character designer that worked on all of Persona 3 also worked on Persona 4. And he, being the first character, he was kind of the basis for everything. So when designing him, they had to keep this air of neutrality. This sort of like blend where you can take elements from him, but also make him unique enough to be his own person. Now, do you remember all that time ago when I mentioned that I was having trouble picking a name for our protagonist? It was either Makoto Yuki, Minato Arisato, or Sakuya Shiomi. Part of the trouble behind this, and a lot of public debate about what his name actually is mainly due to the order that everything came out. The manga came out before the movies did, and the movies have his actual canon name. The manga has Minato Arisato, and the movies have Makoto Yuki. The thing is, though, now we have Sakuya Shiomi, who is the stage play character. When it comes to stage plays, they usually take a lot of liberties when it comes to protagonist characters. They change up the name slightly, or they change up the basis of how the story works to make it more entertaining to a live audience. So, what does this mean for our main protagonist that I have been calling protagonist this whole time, except for the times when I've called him Minato? Well, his canon name, his official name, is Makoto Yuki. 100% confirmed. But if we're talking about the manga, or what I named my character, Minato Arisato is the one to go for. Sakuya Shiomi will barely ever be brought up because that is the stage play, and that's more its own thing. And I'd say it's more canon to itself, rather than connected to any of the other games, or any of the other pieces of media in the franchise. Out of all of the characters, all of the protagonists that have been shown off in the entire Persona series, he's actually the shortest, standing at 5'7". Our protagonist, being a mostly mute character, had some interesting characterizations in the manga, the movies, and a couple other different locations. In most of them, he was actually very quiet, very reserved, pretty much didn't care about anything, so close to apathetic, if you will, and oddly enough, had a very large appetite. Also, going back to the movie thing, we actually have the list for all 4 movies. All 4 movies came out in order a year apart. So, you're supposed to watch them in order: Spring of Birth, Midsummer Night's Dream, Falling Down, and Winter of Rebirth. Those came out in 2013, 2014, 2015, and 2016, respectively. And you're supposed to watch all 4 of them in order to get the entire Persona 3 story. And to wrap off our section about our protagonist, one thing to note is that in the very first game, he could wield every single weapon except knives. The funny thing is, though, in the manga, the first weapon he is ever given are knives. It is specifically a kitchen knife. To add on top of that, in future remakes of the game, like Fess and Portable, and now Reload, they have condensed him down to only using one weapon. That would be the short sword type. So he can only use short swords from now on. And now we can finally move on from this whole section about the protagonist and a couple other small details onto a different character. This time we're going to talk a little bit about Yukari and some little fun facts about her. The lead character designer actually said that Yukari's design was one of his favorites, which is pretty impressive, I'll admit. It takes a little bit for a character design to be considered a favorite, especially if you're the one designing it. You have to criticize yourself pretty harshly in order to pump out a good product like this. To pump out a good character, I should say. But to have it as your favorite is actually, it's kind of an achievement, really. Junpei often calls Yukari Yuka-tan. I checked out honorifics because why not? I figured it'd be just a quick thing to learn. Tan is actually supposed to be an even cuter and more affectionate version of Chan, which is pretty interesting because I actually hadn't heard of Tan basically ever. I think that this shows two things about Junpei and Yukari's relationship, is that Junpei, while childish, actually considers her like a very close friend. And even though Yukari doesn't return that back in basically any form, it's still nice to see a dynamic like that where it's a little bit unbalanced in terms of something like calling someone's name. And because Yukari is the first one we ever see use an evoker, less of actually using it and more having one, I'm gonna consider these small evoker facts tied to Yukari. For example, the exact gun model that the evoker was based off of is a Ruger Mark III semi-automatic pistol. This same exact gun got a 1-to-1 scale water gun recreation by the Happy Kuji company to celebrate the release of the first movie. This is stupid, but I kinda love it. Evokers are also meant to symbolize death, or the acceptance of death, and it's meant to be more of a... really just a symbol for mortality as well. And we also see that every character that, so far, our protagonist, Junpei, and Yukari, all hold it and use it differently. Yukari actually puts it up to her forehead, whereas Makoto and Junpei put it directly to the side. Makoto shows no resistance to being shot, while Junpei shows so much knockback, like so much kick to being shot with it. And for those wanting to make their own Yukari cosplay, it is very important to note that her cardigan, well, I don't know what to call it. Is it a cardigan? Is it a sweater? I don't know. Point is that her entire top actually does have a zipper along the middle. It can actually be really hard to see in some artwork, and especially on something like the model, but it's important to note that that there is a zipper there, but it only exists after a wide V at the bottom. Honestly, this was less of a fact and more of a note to all of those who like to cosplay. And frankly, I would cosplay as a few of these characters, if I'm being honest. I would love to do that sometime. I just like taking note of the small details, especially when it comes to the cosplays. Also, another note about Yukari is that apparently the tights, the stockings, have hearts on them. I don't know if this is true or not, but there should be some sort of a print to it. I'm gonna be honest, sadly there isn't a lot to talk about Yukari without spoiling a lot of story details and stuff involving her actual life. So, I'm gonna have to put that on hold and move on to Junpei. First off, Junpei makes two different references that are actually pretty funny. The first is during his level up quote. He actually says ta-da-da-da, which is like to celebrate, right? This is actually pretty close to the jingle from Fist of the North Star, and it's kind of a nice reference to see. Another thing is that his original victory pose actually alludes to John Travolta's disco pose in Saturday Night Fever. But this same pose could also be a reference to baseball, specifically the New York Yankees player Wade Boggs when he jumped onto a horse after a World Series baseball game. If someone hacks into the Persona 4 files, they can actually find Junpei's character model. This is basically because Persona 4 was built on the same engine that Persona 3 was, so it has a lot of leftover assets and stuff that carried over as kind of a basis for what should come in Persona 4, like how it should be made. And that's not it for Junpei. Junpei has another thing to talk about here. When it comes to the Magician Arcana, they are heavily magic-based. He's unique in the fact that he's actually more physical-based than he is magic, which is really surprising. A lot of his attacks, his spells specifically, you've noted are 2 physical and a fire-type attack and 1 buffing-type attack. I think that, over time he's going to get more fire skills, but mainly it's going to be physical skills. In a lot of the gameplay and artwork, Junpei appears to be shorter than Akihiko. The strange thing about this is that Junpei's actually taller than Akihiko. Maybe it has something to do with the limits of the game models or something. I don't know. And going back to Yucatan, this is actually also a pun to the Yucatan Peninsula. But in the original Japanese script, Junpei calls Yukari Yukarichi, which is just a normal nickname used for close friends. So you can see that relationship continues in the Japanese script, and it carries over in the American script. And now for some more random and miscellaneous facts. We're going to start specifically with Orpheus, the persona. An interesting case about Orpheus is that a lot of different protagonist personas have multiple forms. But Orpheus is the only one to have gender-specific changes. In Persona 3 Portable, there is you could pick a female protagonist instead of playing as the guy. And so Orpheus actually changes design. The hair, the color, and the shape of the harp all change. As a way to pay respects to EO, I have been constantly mispronouncing their name back when I did their review. So EO actually has a unique design note that I never pointed out before. And it's actually something I'm glad I could have looked up and found. The Taurus zodiac symbol can actually be seen between the nostrils of the cow, of the heifer, indicating EO's association with the constellation. However, what's important to note is that Yukari is actually a Libra. That's your fun little extra Yukari fact, since I couldn't find that many of them. And finally, a bit of fun facts about Hermes, aka Junpei's persona. Hermes has shown up before in a previous game, and it was, let's see. It was in Persona 2 Innocent Sin. In this one, he actually had a very heavy rocket motif, oddly enough. But in Persona 3, he traded that out for a more Grecian and winged motif. Hermes in this previous game also had very heavy ties to, oddly enough, soldiers, which, you know, for the theming of that game, Persona 2 Innocent Sin, makes sense, but, you know, I'm glad we have the Hermes that I know now. And I'm pretty sure this wraps up all of the time that I can dedicate to little fun facts about the characters and little miscellaneous things, as now the grind is over and I can get on to talking about something way more interesting than probably the same garbage you could have Googled too. And now we can move on to the more important thing, aka what this episode is named after. The episode title is actually based entirely on half of this episode and what we're doing, which is social links. I actually really wanted to get into these sooner, but getting through the early game is a bit more important than getting through social links. And because we got to the end of the Tevel block, now we can focus entirely on having a social life. Finally, something I can achieve, just not in real life at all. But before we get into all the social link fun, we're gonna have to sit through some more dialogue that is somewhat relevant to the plot in some form. I have no idea. I'm pretty sure this assembly isn't important at all, like most assemblies, but, you know, maybe it'll be a special kind of day. Who knows, maybe they'll give out those blue ribbons they used to give out back in, like, yeah, the early days of school, like kindergarten, first grade, elementary, basically. If they give out those blue ribbons again, I mean, that'd be pretty cool. It's better than, you know, sitting through, like, a speech about, like, I don't know, something, I guess. Pretty much anything is better than a TED Talk. Also, I understand that, like, you're the principal, and sometimes you have to give a speech to your school, right? But, like, if you feel like you were outdone by the class president, aka someone who relates more to the current class than you do as the principal, then, like, if you feel like the need to outdo them, what was the point in doing any of this in the first place? It's so pointless, it's so petty, it's dumb, I hate it. Just, why? Like, seriously, imagine, like, the extent that you have to go through as the principal, like, the mental, like, process, to be like, the class president made a really good speech, but, like, isn't it my job to make speeches sometimes? Maybe I should be the one making this exact same speech, so I'm gonna say it again. And I'm gonna make it better, because I'm the principal, I'm an adult, I definitely relate to children. It's I can't continue this rant anymore because it's just going in circles about, like, this one dude just talking about relating to kids on such a level to make a speech to them that makes them feel better. On top of getting a special request from Mitsuru, we are also in math class, so, who knows, maybe this will be my specialty, as I like math. Let's see what question they're gonna ask me today. And today it looks like we're looking at quadratic functions, aka the one part of normal math that I hate. Because the math involved is a bit much. Of course, this is gonna suck for me, isn't it? Luckily, thanks to this picture and the power of Google, I can easily find out the answers. All 4 of these options are algebraic spirals. Basically, you put in a certain equation and it makes this beautiful looking shape. The problem is, one of these is not actually an algebraic spiral at all. If you look closely, one of these is a bit too perfect. Bit too, like perfectly circular and spiral. There's no weird curves or anything, there's no deviations in the formula, it's just a perfect line. The answer to this question is actually A, because it's a logarithmic spiral, which is completely different than an algebraic one. Basically, it uses a certain, well, logarithm. I don't even know if that's the correct word. I don't know anything about this. All I know is that this is actually more of an artistic piece called the golden spiral, and it's used to help for various proportions of, well, various things. It's meant to be like the perfect circle or the perfect spiral, used in a lot of media. I have a good friend of mine who's pretty far out, but he took calculus, so maybe he'd be able to actually teach me about these at some point. He's usually pretty good about this certain kind of stuff. He was in like all the special like AP classes and basically all the high level stuff. He was also class valedictorian, so, you know, who knows. If I ask him about these, maybe he'd be willing to teach me about these and, like, see... So, I mean, basically, it's a chance for me to learn. Because, frankly, I like math, but the second that we get to this kind of math, it gets just a bit crazy, you know? I'm better at geometry. Way better at geometry. Algebra is, like, kind of good. Regular math, great. You get the point. On the plus side, me being an idiot with a phone that has access to Google... Now I know what the answer is, and my points and knowledge has increased by exactly 1 point. Amazing. This was definitely worth it.
That's it.
Wait, was it points in knowledge or points in charm because I impressed the class? Pretty sure it should be knowledge. That seems right. As you can obviously tell, I record all of my, you know, talking and audio in post rather than live, so... You know, it's a bit complicated sometimes. Occasionally I forget specific details, but also when it comes to answering questions in class, why are some of these charm-based and some of them knowledge-based? That doesn't make any sense. I get that I impress the class and that increases charm, but like I answered a question correctly. That should just be in academics. Just make it academics. Don't make it charm. Charm is more like I talked during this, like, school presentation thing. Like, why? Anyway, sorry for my miniature rant there, but Mitsuru has asked us to join the student council, which is another club that we can attend. We are gonna be one busy student because I'm pretty sure we might join more clubs. Anyways, another thing to note is, guess we have to go to Miss Toriumi to actually get signed up for the student council, so that's gonna be nice. I think the concept of student councils in media has always had me, like, interested in joining one back when I was in school, but at the same time, I just knew that I don't like that sort of stuff, and that I'm not cut out for it at all. And honestly, if I preferred to, you know, join any club, it would be art club or something, not, like, student council. I don't think that student councils, like, in real life, actually have a lot of sway in terms of, like, doing things. So, like, there was really no point to join a student council if, like, nothing I said mattered anyway. You actually have more power by being in the student body than you did in the student council, in a weird variety of ways. I don't know. I just like the concept of a student council and being able to be a part of it, but I don't like the actual, like, real-life application of it. I don't quite fit in with that sort of, that group. Also, it's mainly due to my background with, like, not participating as much in, like, politics or sports or really anything that wasn't outside of the arts in some form. Because I participated so much in, like, the arts and stuff, I was more interested in, like, you know, writing, music, games, obviously, but especially art and, like, how it could be used. So, by not, like, going outside of my box of, like, art or geeky nerddom or whatever, right? It's like, I don't understand, like, politics, and I don't understand sports all that well, so people have to, like, actually explain that stuff to me in, like, a very, like, blunt way, in, like, a very simple way, because I'm not, like, on a complex level yet. And student council technically counts as, like, student politics in some way, and that just didn't appeal to me at all. Anyways, moving on from student politics and student council, now we can talk to the nurse again and drink whatever he cooked up this time, because apparently this dude thinks he's like, I don't know, an alchemist? I don't get it. I don't understand this one specific school nurse at all. Well, on the plus side, at least courage went up by 1. I still wonder what he means by Saturn is calling. Maybe it's to show that he's just a little bit out there and bizarre, or maybe it's some sort of reference I don't get. I don't quite know, and I think I'm gonna look it up, just, like, basically right now to see what he actually means. Okay, so I found a lot of different answers to this, but it pretty much just amounts to nothing. It's literally just his way of being somewhat bizarre as a character. But, there are reports of people, like, doing rituals to Saturn. There's Saturn as the Roman god, so it's a mythology-based thing. There's also, like, someone explained that Saturn is calling, or something like that is more of a humorous way to disengage from a conversation. And I found out something pretty interesting that literally doesn't apply to this, but it's something called a Saturn return, where what happens is that, like, every 27, so basically in your late 20s, Saturn is going to be in the same position that it was when you were born. So whenever this happens, it represents, like, becoming an adult and facing adult challenges. It has nothing to do with this nurse at all, but I just found it pretty cool.
I am thou. Thou art I. Thou hast established a new bond. Thou shalt have our blessing when thou choosest to create a persona of the Emperor Arcana.
And this is the Emperor Arcana, the Student Council. This mainly applies to Hidetoshi Odagiri, rather than Chihiro or Mitsuru. So it's gonna be a fun time interacting with him more. I apologize for talking over the social link, because I was rambling about Saturn, and what it meant when Saturn is calling, so yeah, I'm sorry about that. Basically, it all boils down to meeting the entire student council and just being like, hey, I'm a new member, I'll show up occasionally. I'm not even gonna be here all the time. Mainly, I'm gonna be hanging out with Kenji at the ramen shop. As a quick heads up, because this is the Emperor Arcana, remember that in the upright position, it means stability, structure, protection, authority, control, practicality, focus, and discipline. All of which could theoretically apply to a member of the student council. We're gonna watch these as Hidetoshi, we talk to him more and as he develops, so, you know, that's something to look out for as we go through the social links. Really, the reason why I talk about what the major arcanas represent, and pointing out how they connect to social links and say, like, hey, watch as they develop, and watch as you see them, like, actively take part in these things, It's mainly a chance to talk about, like, just the characters themselves and how they connect to this thing. It's also, like, symbolism, media literacy, and it's a lot of different things that I think nowadays we're kind of failing in. Media literacy has gone down by a lot, actually, and we kind of miss the point of most things entirely, especially when presented to us in book, game, or movie form. And it's pretty bad that we just can't get it right, even on, like, normal videos, like normal YouTube videos with, like, random titles or different meanings or whatever. We can't seem to get it right because we're kind of messing it up more and more, and things are getting more muddled along the way. It's kind of like a large game of telephone, but you fail at the first person rather than failing at the middle or the last person. I think talking about media literacy and also, like, learning to become more, like, aware of symbolism and various things like that is very good for, you know, development of ourselves to understand, like, different references like this. And to be able to point things out and say, hey, that relates to this, and I know it from this exact thing, and I'm glad I can make this connection between the two, because I now know where this piece of media draws inspiration from. So, like, Persona draws inspiration from tarot cards, or from mythology, or from folklore and culture. Stuff like that, like, that's important literacy to have. I also blame, like, a large part of why media literacy is dying and is currently in a massive decrease into short-form content, mainly because that's just the way that things go. A lot of people are hooked on the short-form content because, sure, my video is an hour long and you can spend an entire hour to it, but would you rather watch one video that's an hour long like this, or like 60 different videos in an addictive motion and an addictive algorithm that understands you, each one at a minute? And most people are going to choose that 60 now because that's what we've gotten hooked on. And I have the same problem too. I really need to watch more long-form footage, more long-term sort of videos rather than short, because it's just better. It's higher quality, there's a lot more to discuss and analyze and learn in that than in short-form content.
How many are you selling?
And it's less addictive, so it's very chill and allows you to really focus and analyze. Basically, another part of this is that, like, the new generation is growing up with the short-form content, so they don't actually know what this long-form content is really like. So I'm talking, when I say new generation, I'm talking anyone that's, like, Gen Alpha, maybe very late Gen Z. But at the same time, like, if we're talking early Gen Z, maybe a bit of mid, and so, like, millennials, we've all had long-form content, and that's what we've grown used to. If you note, there's a massive gap in media literacy between this specific group of millennials to about mid-Gen Z, and late Gen Z to early Gen Alpha, but this is mainly due to the fact that they're kids. But because media literacy isn't something that's really taught often, now we have a group that is going to grow up and eventually not be as literate and as, like, aware of current things and symbolism and various things like that, because there's nothing to actually teach them that stuff, and there's no long-form content to discuss that sort of thing. Am I making a massive point why you should watch my stuff instead of scrolling through Reels or TikTok or YouTube, like, shorts? Yes, it's kind of like a sponsoring thing, it's a self-promotion thing, but I'm not just saying this for myself, I'm saying this for anyone that makes long-form content that isn't live streaming. I'm saying this for anyone who has to record and edit all these videos, who has to put all their time into it. Someone that doesn't use AI. Someone that, like, actually puts so much effort into their videos for their fans. And for, like, their subscribers, for their viewers. For all of these things. Put more effort into watching long-form content that is longer than a minute, at least. Anything longer than a short, anything longer than a reel or a TikTok, anything like that. Put more effort into that, and you're gonna see it pay off by actively learning stuff about the things that you're actually interested in. And also, you know, about live streamers, feel free to watch live streamers. There's so many good, like, streamers out there that, like, they're genuinely enjoyable. They make really good content. Either in talking about, like, modern-day topics, something like what Critical does, or, you know, something like gameplay, like, Flats playing Overwatch. Seriously, like, look them up. They're really enjoyable people. They know what they're talking about. They're a lot older than I am, you know? I think that just, if you watch streams, you're not exactly supporting long-form content, but you're supporting, like, live content, which is a bit different. But at the same time, I mean, it's better than short-form content that only makes, like, so many views, uses a ton of AI, and, like, it's a complete nightmare. A lot of streamers actually put in a lot of effort into what they do. So honestly, just basically watch anything that isn't short-form content. Like, just go for it. Like, take, like, an entire day to yourself and don't even touch Instagram Reels. Don't touch YouTube Shorts. Don't touch TikTok. Just try it for, like, a day. And if you're hooked on it, you're going to see how hard it is, and if you're not hooked on it, it's going to be a lot easier, but you're also going to find a lot of interesting people, like, outside of this short-form content bubble that make really cool stuff. Seriously, spend however long that you need, right? Basically, any video essay from 30 hours to 30 hours? No, 30 minutes to 3 hours. Spend any amount of time on, like, a video essay that long, and you're gonna feel like you got more out of that than you did from, like, scrolling through shorts or reels for, like, an hour. It's amazing that, like, you know, there's a massive gap of, like, what you're getting out of something from long-form content compared to short-form. Seriously, just dedicate that time, and, you know, if you don't have that amount of time in a row, there's always a pause button. There's the watch later option on every video on YouTube, so you could just save it there. And most video essays, like the really good ones, are divided up into sections, meaning that, like, at any given chapter that they're done with, you could just stop right there. Also, YouTube saves your progress on videos. You could just go back to the video as long as you have an account, which you're supposed to have an account. So, like, what's stopping you from watching long-form content? What's really stopping you? Literally nothing.
Can you wash this for me? I'm not their mother, you know. At least I don't have to worry about gaining weight, since I'm always running around taking care of them. How about you? Are you enjoying track and field? Oh yeah? That's good to hear. Thought it might be boring for you, since you're so much better than everyone else. I can tell just by looking. It's like you've got your own style, and you don't waste much energy. Well, if you have any questions, just ask Kaz. You know, Kazushi. You guys are in the same class, so I'm sure he'd be willing to help you. You can ask me too if you want, since I'm the manager.
I am thou. Thou art I. Thou hast established a new bond.
Anyway, this is Yuko Nishiwaki of the Strength Arcana. This is our newest social link that we get out of doing, well, the second rank with Kazushi. As the social link of the Strength Arcana, she represents courage, bravery, confidence, compassion, self-confidence, and inner power. So, obviously, be on the lookout for these things as we go through the social links. And already within our time limit, we have officially started 2 new social links, and we've advanced on Kazushi, which is a good start so far. That means we have access to about 4 or 5 lines now. So, how much more can we do? Well, there's gonna be a ton more in this game alone. We just have to keep working through them as we go along and branch out. The more connections we make, the better it is. And here we see Junpei talking about an online game that he was addicted to. Now, this game that he has and has given to us is called Innocent Sin Online, which is actually a reference to Persona, one of the prequels, Persona 2 Innocent Sin. This game is a bit complicated, I'm gonna be honest. and I have yet to even touch anything before Persona 3, so 1 and both 2 games are completely new to me, and I have no idea what happens in them at all. But this gives me a lot of time to research about specifically Persona 2, both Persona 2 games. And yes, you heard that right, there are 2 of them. Persona 2 was an interesting case where the game was split up into 2 parts, as in 2 separate games with 2 different storylines that ran directly into each other, meaning that you had to play one of them first, and then the other one just right off the bat, second one. I don't understand anything about it, but all I know is that a lot of controversial things happen in that game, and the entire theme about it is rumors and how they work. And there's a lot of, weird ties to actual real-world events. It's pretty wild, but, I think it'd be worth checking out at some point. So here to help, extend the time frame and, eventually get to the end of the episode, I'm actually just doing some random things that I think would be just nice to do. Checking out different stores at night, going to vending machines and buying drinks out of them, mainly because the drinks don't offer much in terms of recovery, but they are kind of useful. A couple of them are SP-based drinks, and I think they restore 5 or 10, and the HP-based ones heal about maybe 10 to 20. They're not great, but they're kind of like a last-ditch effort recovery item if you just need barely enough to get by. And they have proven useful before, back when I played Persona 5 Strikers. That game, I'm gonna be honest, you really had to do SP to really get through that one, otherwise every fight was like an absolute, it was brutal, it was so slow. But yeah, it's just a chance to just pack up some things, check things out, and also to explain something. I worked at Chagall, I think that's the term, Chagall Cafe earlier, and basically this grants me a point in Charm, a point in Guts, and it also gives me some money. And depending on what their listing is for if they need you or not on the cell phone, if it's urgent, they pay you more. If it's not urgent, they pay you the same rate. It's actually a really good way to grind up your social skill, specifically for Charm and Guts, but also it's kind of good, especially in the money front, if you're not going to Tartarus at all. It's so useful. Speaking of drinks from the vending machine, there's actually a variety of references placed in these drinks, and they're meant to be parodies of, well, real drinks. Mad Bull is supposed to be Red Bull. Sobe is actually supposed to be Sobe Life Water, which is like a flavored water. Moonkissed is Sunkissed. Cielo Mist is actually a reference to 2 things, the Digital Devil Saga, but also to Sierra Mist, which is now called, well, I forgot the new name of it. Point is, that was Sierra Mist. That's what it used to be. Dr. Salt and Fountain Dew are obviously Dr. Pepper and Mountain Dew. Nasty is actually supposed to be like Nestea, the tea by Nestle. Bower Bar is supposed to be a power bar, literally. 1-Up is supposed to be a play on 7-Up. Ceylon tea is actually a tea that is from Sri Lanka, except it's called either Ceylon or Ceylon. I don't know how to pronounce it, but it's a tea that was made over in Sri Lanka. There's also Starfix for Starbucks, and Aquafina for, well, Aquafina. The drink parodies are actually pretty nice. They're small little details, and it's a way that they could just, put the drink in the game without actually putting the drink in the game. Or in the Power Bar's case, the Power Bar. You get the point, though. It's actually pretty nice to see, little things like that to make it seem real, at least real enough. And it's kind of funny, especially with something like Sierra Mist that doesn't exist anymore, meaning that the game, actually makes sense for the time period, being, 2008, 2009. So, Sierra Mist still would have existed back then. It's kind of funny to see how things age like that. Anyways, now it's time to play an MMORPG, aka a game I would never play in real life, actually, because I suck at these.
I am thou. Thou art I. Thou hast established a new bond. Thou shalt have our blessing when thou choosest to create a persona of the Hermit.
This is Maya of the Hermit Arcana. This is another social link for the books. The Hermit Arcana represents self-reflection, introspection, contemplation, withdrawal, solitude, and the search for self. And this not only ties to just Maya. This social link may tie to just Maya and how that works, but it also kind of ties to the entire MMORPG, Innocent Sin Online, which, being a reference, a massive reference to Persona 2 Innocent Sin and the other Persona 2 game, have that same theme about reality and truth. So you're gonna see all of that being covered under one social link. And the references that you see here, like Maya, Maya is a character in Persona 2, and so is Tatsuya. Now that means my protagonist has 4 names, but Tatsuya is a protagonist of one of the 2 Persona games. One of the 2 Persona 2 games, I should say. It's crazy to see that, like, they're like hard referencing Persona 2 this hard, but in such a way that, like, makes sense by turning it into an MMORPG, where, like, it's, like, very, like, gritty and, like, very introspective in a lot of ways, and it forces you to, like, look at the truth and reality and stuff like that, much like the games did. And that reference to, if you see any Jokers, come save me, there was a character, the Joker, or one Joker, or I forget his actual name, but that was the main antagonist of those games. So it's like a giant reference. It's one massive reference rolled into one social link. I will say, though, the internet, like, leet speak is a little annoying, but a lot of people find it to be, like, the worst part of Persona 3, but honestly, I find the leet speak in, like, the late 2000s to be one of the funniest amounts of, like, it's just funny quotes and funny words. All these, like, letters and symbols that, like, barely mean anything that you have to, like, read out and actually figure out because of leet speak. It's just fun. I love it. It's a nice addition. Also, because I'm rich from working, and also, Tartarus, I have bought all of the internet software. It's all mine. Nobody else can have it. I claim it all. But no, seriously, we're gonna use some of this internet software on the shared computer to, well, figure out what we can do with it. With the shared computer, what we can do is a wide variety of different things. As long as we have software we can use, we can spend a little bit of time on this shared computer that belongs to the whole dormitory, and we can actually learn things. This can buff up our social skills in either charm, courage, or academics. It could actually buff our persona's HP or SP, depending on software, and also some of it gets you access to some very special stuff. For example, the fan book of the one shop, which allows us to order online and bring food to our dormitory. I like that this game is in 2008, and mainly because of the software packages. Because of the way I grew up, I never had experience with software packages. I'm used to the keys that, like, Windows gives out whenever you buy their software, and yes, that's technically a software package, but that's more of a key to actually load it onto your computer. And then there's also, like, different software I use. Like, for example, my Wacom tablet has its own software. It uses, like, the Wacom software. And that came with, like, a CD that I had to load onto my laptop at one point. But I never got to experience software packages like these did. Like, these operate, or in such a way that you had to, like, buy them from stores. You could, like, buy them or rent them, or, you know, have a lot of them just, like, around. I never had a single software package. Anyways, I went past my episode time limit, so I'm going to wrap things off here. I had a really great session with this, and next episode is going to be even better. All I gotta say is, well, I hope that y'all have a great day, or a great week, or however long it takes for me to upload another one of these videos. Point is, just have fun, be yourself, and talk to people. I don't know. Oh, and remember what I said. Watch long-form content, please. Any video essay. Alright. See ya.